There's a plant on this earth that waits 100 years to bloom for a single moment, and then it dies. What if your entire life was building toward one moment you hadn't reached yet? We live in a world that has forgotten how to wait. We want the notification now, the result now, the answer, the reward, the proof that we matter now. We refresh the screen. We check the numbers. We compare our chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20. And when the thing we want doesn't arrive on our schedule, we assume it's not coming at all. We call ourselves failures at 25, behind at 30, too late at 40. But deep in the mountains of South America, standing in thin air at 15,000 feet above sea level, there's an ancient organism that has been alive for nearly a century, and it hasn't even begun yet. It hasn't bloomed. It hasn't flowered. It hasn't shown the world what it's been building. Not because it failed, but because it wasn't time. Today, we're going to talk about the rarest blooms on Earth, plants that spend 25, 50, even 100 years preparing for a single act of beauty. One exhale of purpose, one moment of everything they were born to do. And what they teach us might change the way you see your own life. Let's begin with a plant most people have seen, but very few have understood. The Agave Americana. You've probably walked past one. Maybe in a garden, maybe on a sidewalk in Southern California, or along a stone wall in the Mediterranean. It sits there, low, quiet, thick-leaved, and unmoving, year after year after year. To most people, it looks like it's doing nothing. It's not flowering. It's not climbing. It's not spreading across the garden, stealing sunlight from everything around it. It's just sitting there, and so we ignore it, the way the world ignores anyone who isn't performing. Anyone who isn't producing visible, obvious, immediate results. But beneath that stillness, something extraordinary is happening. For 25 years, sometimes 30, the agave is pulling minerals from the soil, storing sugars in its core, thickening its leaves, deepening its roots, and building, quietly, invisibly, the most elaborate internal architecture of any succulent on Earth. It is engineering a masterpiece inside itself. And then one day, without warning, without announcement, a stalk begins to rise from its center. Not a small stalk, a tower. It can grow up to 30 feet tall, sometimes 40. It rises at a rate of nearly a foot per day, one of the fastest growth events in the plant kingdom. Branches explode outward, covered in thousands of golden yellow flowers, buzzing with bees and hummingbirds and bats that have been waiting, some of them migrating thousands of miles, for this exact moment. The agave has spoken. After a quarter-century of silence, it has finally said everything it came here to say. And then, it dies. The entire plant collapses. The leaves wither. The stalk dries and falls. The organism that spent decades building toward this moment gives everything it has in the bloom, pours every stored sugar, every mineral, every molecule of energy into this single act of creation. And let's go. Now, I need you to sit with that for a moment, because the agave didn't fail for 25 years. It didn't waste those decades. It wasn't stuck. It wasn't behind. Every single day of those 25 years was the bloom. The bloom didn't happen to the agave at the end. The bloom happened through it, across every quiet, invisible, unwitnessed moment of preparation. We just couldn't see it yet. But if the agave teaches us about decades of patience, then there's another plant that teaches us about something even deeper, something that borders on the spiritual. At the top of the Andes Mountains, in air so thin that most humans struggle to breathe, in soil so poor that almost nothing grows, in temperatures that swing from scorching noon sun to below freezing midnight, there stands a plant called Puya raimondii, the queen of the Andes. And it is, without exaggeration, one of the most patient living organisms ever documented by science. The Puya raimondii can live for 80 to 100 years. Some researchers believe certain specimens have exceeded 150. And in all that time, across an entire century of existence, it does not bloom. It grows, slowly, quietly, invisibly. Its rosette widens. Its roots dig deeper into rocky, nutrient-poor soil. It withstands hailstorms, drought, frost, ultraviolet radiation that would destroy most plants in weeks. Livestock brush against its spiny leaves. Fires sweep across the hillside. The climate shifts. Governments rise and fall in the valleys below. And the Puya raimondii simply endures. It asks for nothing. It announces nothing. It performs for no one. And then, after 80, 90, sometimes a full 100 years, it blooms. The bloom stalk can hold over 8,000 individual flowers. 8,000. It becomes the largest flower cluster of any plant on Earth, a living cathedral, rising from a place where almost nothing else survives. Hummingbirds that exist nowhere else on the planet come to pollinate it. The entire microecosystem of that hillside reorganizes itself around this single event. For a few weeks, this ancient organism becomes the center of life in one of the harshest environments on Earth. And then, like the agave, it dies. It sets its seeds. It releases them to the wind. And the organism that waited a century for this moment folds and returns to the earth. 100 years of patience for one act of purpose. Let that settle in your chest. Don't think about it. Feel it. Now, you might be thinking, that's beautiful, but I'm not a plant. I don't have a century to wait. And you're right. You don't. But here's what psychology tells us about why these stories move us so deeply and why they matter more now than they ever have. In 1972, a psychologist named Walter Mischel conducted one of the most famous experiments in the history of behavioral science. You may have heard of it, the Stanford marshmallow test. A child was placed in a room with a single marshmallow. They were told, you can eat this marshmallow now. Or, if you wait 15 minutes without eating it, you'll get 2 marshmallows. Then the researcher left the room. Some children ate the marshmallow immediately. Some waited a few minutes and gave in. And some, a small number, waited the entire 15 minutes. When researchers followed up with those children decades later, they found something remarkable. The children who waited, who tolerated the discomfort of delay, had higher academic achievement, better emotional coping skills, healthy relationships, and even lower rates of substance abuse. Delayed gratification wasn't just a skill. It was a predictor of an entire life trajectory. But here's the part of the study that almost nobody talks about. The children who waited successfully didn't just sit there staring at the marshmallow, white-knuckling their way through 15 minutes of agony. They redirected their attention. They sang songs. They talked to themselves. They looked away. They turned the waiting into something else, something active, something creative. They transformed the experience of waiting from suffering into living. And this is exactly what the agave does, what the Puya raimondii does. They don't experience their decades of non-blooming as failure. There is no internal narrative of, I should be flowering by now. There is no comparison to the wildflower across the valley that blooms every spring. There is no existential crisis at year 47 when nothing visible has changed. There is only the quiet, daily act of becoming. Pulling one more mineral from the soil, storing one more gram of sugar, thickening one more cell wall, deepening one more root. The waiting is not empty. The waiting is the work. And yet, for us, as humans, the not yet phase feels unbearable. We live in the age of the visible bloom. Everyone is performing their flowering, online, constantly, loudly. Promotions are announced. Engagements are photographed. Milestones are posted with captions designed to make them seem effortless. And if you're in your quiet season, if you're in your agave years, it can feel like the entire world is blooming without you. But what you're seeing isn't the whole truth. You're seeing the 30-foot stalk. You're not seeing the 25 years of silence that built it. You're seeing the 8,000 flowers. You're not seeing the century of wind, frost, fire, and loneliness that made them possible. There is a concept in psychology called the arrival fallacy, a term coined by Harvard psychologist Tal Ben-Shahar. It describes the illusion that once we arrive at a certain goal, we will finally be happy. That the bloom, the achievement, the milestone, the destination, is where meaning lives. But research consistently shows the opposite. People who achieve major goals often experience a surprising sense of emptiness afterward. The promotion comes, and the next morning feels the same. The book is published, and the self-doubt doesn't disappear. The wedding happens, and life is still life. Because the meaning was never in the bloom. The meaning was in the becoming. The agave does not bloom, so it can finally matter. It already mattered. Every year. Every silent, root-bound, unwitnessed year. The bloom is not the reward for the waiting. The bloom is the expression of the waiting. It is everything the plant learned, stored, endured, and built, made visible for a single, fleeting moment, and then released. If you're in your quiet years right now, if you feel unseen, unfinished, like you're preparing for something you can't yet name, you're not behind. You're underground. And underground is where the strongest roots grow. So what would it look like to live the way these plants live? Not passively, not in resignation, but in deep, purposeful, patient accumulation. What if you stopped measuring your life by what has bloomed and started honoring what is growing? What if the book you haven't finished yet is not a failure, but a root system still deepening? What if the career that hasn't taken off is not stalled, but storing energy in ways you can't yet see? What if the relationship you're slowly, carefully building, the one that doesn't photograph well, the one that doesn't have a dramatic origin story, is the one that will outlast everything? Japanese culture has a concept called ma. It refers to the space between things, the pause, the gap, the silence between notes that gives music its meaning. Ma is not emptiness. Ma is potential. Ma is the held breath before the orchestra plays. Ma is the quiet years of the Puya, raimondii, years that are not blank, but full of invisible architecture, full of readiness. Nature does not rush, and yet everything it creates is breathtaking. The agave does not compare itself to the rose. The Puya raimondii does not envy the dandelion its easy annual bloom. They do not perform for validation. They do not bloom to prove they are alive. They bloom because after years of patient, quiet, faithful building, they are finally ready to give everything they have. Not to receive, to give. The bloom is not a taking. It's a release, an offering, a gift of seeds and pollen sent into the wind for the next generation. The most extraordinary things in this world are not built quickly. They are not built loudly. They are built in the kind of silence that most people cannot endure. But you can. You can endure the quiet season. You can trust the process you cannot see. You can honor the roots you are growing, even when no one else knows they're there. Somewhere in the Andes right now, there's a Puya raimondii that has been alive for 90 years. It has survived drought, fire, frost, thin air, harsh soil, nearly a century of existence in one of the most unforgiving landscapes on the planet. It has never bloomed. No one has photographed it for a nature documentary. No tourist has marveled at it. No scientist has written a paper about it. It sits on a windswept hillside, alone, in silence, looking to anyone passing by, like it is doing nothing. But inside, it is almost ready. Inside, 100 years of stored sunlight, absorbed minerals, and ancient patience are converging toward a single point. A stalk is forming, slowly, invisibly, cell by cell. And one morning, maybe next year, maybe in 5 years, that stalk will begin to rise. And it will not stop rising until it towers 40 feet above the earth, crowned with 8,000 flowers, surrounded by hummingbirds, backlit by the Andean sun. And for a few brief weeks, the entire mountain will know it was alive. You don't have to bloom today. You just have to keep building. The mountain already knows you're here. If this message found you at the right time, if you needed to hear that your quiet season is not wasted, stay here for a while. This channel, The Plant Mind, is a place where we slow down, where we let nature teach us what the world has made us forget, where the roots matter as much as the flowers. If that sounds like something your mind needs, subscribe. Not because I'm asking you to, but because you deserve a place that reminds you. You are not behind. You are becoming. You are not behind. You are underground. And underground is where the strongest roots grow.